I want to talk about Castlevania, the hit Netflix series. Take one. Man, I love Netflix's Castlevania. Did I say Castlevania's Netflix? Oh, I hope not. I expected absolutely nothing when I started this series. Okay? Like, I heard Netflix anime series about a 90s video game, and I just immediately assumed it was going to be trash. And, oh man, was I wrong. I was bored, I binged the whole thing immediately, and my mind has been on just everything Castlevania for... how many weeks has it been? Look, this is obviously the first video where I'm actually, trying to put all these new skills I've learned into effort. I figured out how my camera worked. I got colored lights and stuff now. And what really devastates me is that I ordered a House Belmont shirt that I was going to wear for this whole thing. And it's not going to arrive for another 3 weeks. And I can't wait that long to make this video, or else my mind will be on something else. And that's just, that's just not going to work. So instead, I'm wearing this and drinking wine because vampires and stuff.
God, you still think you're funny.
Okay, wine's going away because this is a very bad idea. I'm kind of sitting out in the open and this is absolutely going to fall. Okay, we'll cut the shit. So, how do we rip off Netflix's Castlevania for your D&D game? Maybe you are a player who's looking to play as a boozy Belmont, or as a boisterous Belnades. Or perhaps you're a DM, and you're looking to supplement your game with that lovely thoughtful horror influences of Netflix's setting, or of Castlevania's setting. And that's exactly the kind of stuff we're going to get into in this video. I should start by clarifying exactly what I mean when I say that we're going to be ripping Castlevania off. I don't mean to say that I'm giving you a one-to-one guide on how to make a Castlevania game. Although if you are going to run a Castlevania D&D game, the stuff that you'll find in this video will certainly be something that will help you out. But otherwise, the main plan is that we're going to be going into this and taking what parts we like from Castlevania and being able to implement them into any other game we might be playing. We are opening up the hood of Castlevania and stripping out all the parts. We're finding the character dynamics we like. We're finding the plot details and the tropes that are lovely and that we can replicate or learn from in our own games. We are opening up Castlevania's little black box, and we are taking every single part we would like. Last thing before we jump into the meat of it is that this is a systemless guide. You are not going to find character builds in here. If you're looking for a character build for whatever edition you're playing or whatever game system you're playing, and you want to play as, say, a dual whip Trevor Belmont build, you're a Google search away. You're not going to find that in this guide. We're going to be talking more about the characterization elements of how to roleplay as a Trevor Belmont ripoff, whereas if you're looking for the mechanics of a Trevor Belmont ripoff, you're going to have to look elsewhere, unfortunately. And now the question, of course, is, if I am making this a systemless guide, why is there D&D in the title of the video? And that's because I am of the opinion that D&D has sort of just become the name of the hobby at this point. 5th edition is a pretty good D&D. Pathfinder is probably my favorite D&D. And Wendy's Feast of Legends, that might just be the best D&D of them all. Let's start with characters, a quick and dirty analysis of each of them, and how you might rip them off or approach role-playing as a rip-off of them within your games. Now, all of the elements that we're about to discuss are how you might really sell it working with other players if you are ripping off a Castlevania character. We're going to be going mostly over just the core trio, but all of the things that you will find inside of that analysis is stuff that you can rip off for entirely unrelated characters. That is the whole point. You do not have to be making a Castlevania ripoff to rip off Castlevania elements. So skim on through, see what you like, and steal it. That's what we're doing today. Like some form of bloodsucker, almost.
I'm Trevor fucking Belmont. And I've never lost a fight to man, nor fucking beast.
You are really not very good at this.
Trevor Belmont, last scion of House Belmont, and all around boozy sort of dude. That being said, hands off your D20s, edgelords, because our boy Treffy is in no way what you might think if you just did a surface read of him. A basic scan of Trevor might point to him being a tortured kind of soul, a vampire hunter cast out of an intolerant society who has turned to drink for comfort from a cold and cruel world. And that basically is who Trevor is, if you didn't watch the show. The reality of the matter is quite different. Trevor is this incredibly unique combination of mildly edgy, dangerously competent, and yet remarkably clumsy.
Reflexing is like a cat.
Belmont is a particularly petty sort of character. He's always going to be getting in there with anyone he really doesn't like or any unlikable characters the DM throws at you. And he's going to be throwing these insults back and forth, and he's always going to be grumbling that he doesn't want to be doing whatever you're doing, and generally trying his best, his half-hearted best, let's be honest, to not do the right thing. And in the show, it's Sypha who ultimately brings him out of that bad habit. But you will note that even before he meets Sypha, he will kick and he will complain and he will do everything he can to not do the right thing. But he's not trying very hard, really. He's putting on a pretty good performance that he's not a good guy. But, he always does do the right thing. He fundamentally, he always does. He's just going to complain about it, okay? So you'll want to try and stick to that kind of formula. You want everyone else to have to convince you to be a hero, but if no one convinces you, you're going to do it anyway. Trevor is likely to be the easiest of the core three to rip off, and also the most popular. If you want to steal ideas from Belmont, here's what you should keep in mind. Obviously, a tragic backstory is good, but, don't be a nerd about it. Trevor's a fantastic example of not making a huge deal out of his backstory. You can use your tragic Trevor-esque backstory as an explanation as to why you're such a miserable clod at the start of the game. But it should be something that you can actually overcome fairly quickly on your own. Trevor didn't end up needing revenge. He didn't even get revenge across the entire series for what happened to his family. No, what Trevor needed was people. You will need to account for this and play it up. Be a miserable grouch at the start of the campaign, and don't be afraid to tell people off and let them know why you're the way that you are. Give them the old woe is me anytime it comes up. But don't linger on this part of your character arc for too long. You'll want to move past this stage fairly early, or you'll end up coming off as yet another generic edgelord. Perhaps more importantly, the very moment that Trevor found what he felt was his found family, he immediately dropped the edgelord act. It was gone in pretty much a heartbeat. And then he would just, he maintained his role as a bit of a grumbler, but that was it. He was no longer acting like an edgelord once he had friends. And that's something to keep in mind too, is that you shouldn't be sticking to that persona for too terribly long with your Totally Not Trevor Belmont ripoff. Now, obviously, you are not in pure creative control during a D&D game, whether you're the DM or a player. So you don't necessarily have any control over whether or not your version of Trevor Belmont follows the exact same characterization path or the exact same character arc as Netflix Trevor's character arc. So you can generally try to follow the formula that you show up to the first couple sessions with your character acting like a totally miserable twit. But, by about 4 or 5, you should start finding excuses to tone it down and to get better. Trevor's character arc is fairly quick. It's not dragged out all that long. And you should keep that in mind. If you want to be the kind of Trevor you see in the show, don't be Season 1 Trevor for the entire game, because Season 1 Trevor is the worst version of Trevor. And now the part that the edgelords in the audience will hate the most, but is in fact the fundamentally best part of Trevor Belmont, is the fact that Trevor Belmont is funny. Your value brand Trevor shouldn't be a brain-dead idiot by any means, but he should be less than brilliant. Some form of martial class with a lower intelligence would likely suit your needs best. Trevor is often the butt of the joke, so you should set yourself up to be made fun of by the others, and to ensure that you're not going to take it personally. Frankly, if you can't handle being the subject of everyone else's banter, you probably should not rip off Trevor Belmont. Lastly, if I can offer a quick tip for practically anyone wanting to channel even the smallest of Trevor vibes, never let a failed roll go to waste. You're funny, and don't underestimate how you can sell yourself as this hyper-competent klutz by narrating your failed rolls and describing how your failed check results in some amusing way you hurt yourself or failed to be smooth when you meant to be. So, to summarize, if you would like to be Trevor Belmont or to rip off Trevor Belmont, you need to focus less upon being as edgy as you can possibly be and focus a lot more on being the grumbling hero that all of the other players kind of make fun of low-key, but in good spirits. We're all friends here. That's how you play Trevor.
I'm Saifa Belnades.
Let's move on to one of the most distinctive and entertaining magic users ever put to screen. Let's talk about Saifa Belnades. 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 Belnades and Belmont. If I was Saifa, I would say my name constantly too.
I am a speaker and a scholar of magic. I serve no demon and I do no evil.
Saifa Belnades. Speaker magician, unfailing do-gooder, and Trevor's personalized, hand-picked pain in his ass. To be completely honest, Saifa's about the only other character in the series that can quite match Trevor Belmont in terms of her appeal to rip off as a player character in D&D. But there is one important element that does make her a slightly more difficult character to pull off than Trevor. And it's the fact that while Trevor can be played more or less independently, and the Trevor act of giving everybody else someone to clown on, and that kind of brings all the other players out of their shells and encourages them to roleplay, Sypha is a little different in that Sypha needs someone else who is already role-playing so that she can clown on that person. If you don't already have someone else in your game who is role-playing, or you don't have anyone else that will be a good spirit about these kinds of things, maybe you don't want to rip off Sypha Belnades.
Sypha is actually fairly simple as a character. She really wants to do the right thing, and she has a lot of fun while she's doing it. She also enjoys relentlessly dunking on and pestering her friends. Really, it's kind of a testament to both the writing and the performance that she doesn't come off as a Mary Sue. But, of course, she doesn't, because she's just such a delight every time she's on screen. With this in mind, if you are ripping off Sypha, you have to commit, and you've got to sell it. Anything less, and your Belnades will feel flat and boring. In terms of her general actions, just focus hard on doing the right thing if the path is ahead of you, and if the path is not ahead of you or isn't obvious, then your version of Sypha should begin acting bored or frustrated because she can't dive straight in to the solution.
Now, the most important trick to properly sell Belnades is to remember that she's not necessarily quipping into the void. In fact, I wouldn't even say she's really quipping at all. Sypha is involved in banter more than she is in quips. And the problem with banter as opposed to quips, and I happen to find banter much better and more fun and more entertaining than quips, but the problem with it is that you cannot banter alone.
Belnades needs a Belmont. I mean, not a Belmont specifically, but she needs someone to annoy. If you're unsure, ask around the table during character creation and see if anyone is open to the idea of being each other's comic foil, preferably someone playing a more martial class than you are. If you don't want to be straightforward, then keep an eye out for someone who's playing as a barbarian, a fighter, or a particularly stern paladin. 9 times out of 10, even if that player is new to role-playing, they'll likely be playing their character on the less brainy side of things. And if you know what you're doing, you can really bring this player out of their shell and forge a lasting character relationship that the entire group will look back on as a major source of the campaign's fun and humor. I'll leave you with 2 specific tips for some Sypha banter that is very easy to repeat in different ways without feeling like a broken record.
They weren't expecting Belnades and Belmont.
So, I've been promoted from brain-damaged servant then.
Did you know that the original meaning of the word Belmont is brain-damaged servant?
It is not.
I am a speaker. I know many things.
Now, Trevor obviously does not fall for this joke, but that's not important. The joke itself was the funny part. And if you're playing a D&D game, your fellow players, they very well might play along with it, or they might fail their checks and have to go along with it. And this is something that you can repeat. You are a very brainy, intelligent magic user. Throw a couple points in bluff or deceive or whatever the lying skill is in whatever game system you're playing, and then just start making up facts and telling those fake facts to the characters with lower intelligence in your party. I think these things are generally in good spirits so long as you're not lying about anything, important or detrimental to someone's character. But if you're making up random stuff like frogs are a type of bird and the barbarian believes it, well, now you've got a running joke that the whole party can carry with them along the entire campaign because it's this small little joke that the less intelligent characters can really grab onto, and they won't necessarily remember that, oh, this is a joke about the barbarian. They'll remember that this is a joke between the two of you, and that's exactly the kind of thing you're looking for if you're ripping off Sypha.
What did you just say?
I said shit, okay?
Yes, it's just that you never, curse.
I never used to, and then all this happened, and then you happened.
Me?
Yes, you! I was nice, and then I met you, and now I'm like you.
Okay, this is great. I love this. Do this in your games with the other characters. Sypha is very mad that she is beginning to pick up Trevor's bad habits. And you can start out playing as a very kind of sterile, innocent, goody two-shoes Sypha. And over the span of your game, you can start picking up the habits of the other player characters. And it can sort of roughen the edges of your character. It can make you a little more fun to roleplay over time. It can keep your character fresh. It can also lead to some very funny moments. Maybe you, like Sypha Belnades, are not terribly happy about the fact that you are picking up all these bad habits. Maybe one of the players has some kind of amusing, weird, and sort of unpleasant quirk that they do. If you pick it up, the other players might take a look at what you've done. They might see that you have picked up this other character's habit, and then their character might pick up the habit too. And soon, you've got this thing where the whole party has this running joke of them picking up this habit. Have you ever been part of a friend group, and one of you in the group begins saying a certain phrase or a saying or an idiom, and you use it somewhat frequently, and then within a couple weeks the entire friend group is now using that exact same turn of phrase? Well, this is exactly like this, and it can really help you as a group feel like you are a group of friends in this game because you're picking up each other's idioms, you're picking up each other's habits, and you feel like you are a group of people who is interacting with each other. And that is something that is quite difficult to pull off, but it is sort of the ultimate thing you're going for creating this D&D found family kind of effect.
I know what you are. And what am I?
Did somebody say Alucard? I certainly did. Me, the guy making this video. This was a stupid joke, and I don't know why I've committed to it. But it would have been a better joke if I had someone I was bantering with, which is generally the point of this video so far, isn't it? Okay, but what kind of father names their child their own name, but backwards? Says me, whose father named him after himself without even bothering to turn the name backwards. That's something to think about. I'm gonna be honest, we have a little bit less to work with than we have on the other two of the core trio when it comes to Alucard. And that's because Alucard doesn't actually have as much screen time as you might think. The other thing to sort of compound the fact that we don't see all that much of him is that the biggest thing that we get from Alucard is an aesthetic. But the problem with a character who is mostly aesthetic is that while it works very well in the medium it's in, it does not translate all that well to D&D, which is fundamentally a much more audio-focused hobby. So that elegance associated with him, that like weird cold beauty he's got going on, that just doesn't translate into D&D. So we are missing a very core element of Alucard. Now, look, I do want to defend myself a little tiny bit here, because a few of you will probably be absolute Alucard stans. That's okay. I really like Alucard. But you'll be a little mad that I'm calling Alucard all aesthetic. And I don't mean that as a bad thing. His characterization, I don't mean to say he doesn't have characterization. I mean, a very large amount of his characterization comes through in the visuals and in the way he moves and in that like supernatural posture he has that clashes with his actual actions. I think he's a very, very good character. I think he just has some difficulty translating into the D&D medium. I am a big Alucard fan. Alucard is very cool, and being that he is immortal, I'm hoping that in the Castlevania spin-off, I really want to see more Alucard. So with all that in mind, what do we have on everybody's favorite beautiful vampire boy?
Alucard comes off as cold and extremely alien at first, seemingly driven by hate before his deeper motives are known. Mind you, in the TV show, we learn his deeper motives within about 10 minutes of meeting him. So you are unlikely to find yourself in the same position. You will be dragging yours out a little bit more. Alucard comes with a little pre-packaged dissonance surrounding his monstrous reputation and his earnest, if a little sterile, altruism. This is, of course, tricky to replicate. Your character will only have the reputation you make for them at the table. There's actually very, very few things you can write in your backstory that has that inherent ominousness as being the son of Dracula. So you need to compensate to earn that reputation a little bit first before you become a bit more of the soft boy Alucard. You'll need to start the game a little meaner than the TV version, a little more distant from the world. Hold off on revealing your motives for a while. Focus on getting across that "I'm a cold and scary vampire boy" vibe before you start showing that you're more human than you let on at first. So, how do you go about showing that you're more human than you let on? Well, the show handled it in a certain way. We saw that he and Trevor did not get along at first. And that, surprisingly, ended up being his hook into friendship and humanity. The two were constantly insulting each other. But after a certain point...
If you two can manage not to kill each other while I'm gone.
Oh, please. We're not children. He shouldn't die. Yes, fuck you.
It became clear that Alucard was forming a very friendly sort of rivalry that was likely to give way into a normal friendship sooner rather than later. I think you have a pretty good shot at pulling off an interaction like this with another player, especially, say, a paladin who'd innately be suspicious of you. Build your rivalry. Start with barely contained hostility. Barrage your target with threats, which will give way in time to mockery, and then into banter, and finally, into friendship. Now, once you're warm to everyone, we actually don't get a lot of context as to what Alucard is like when he's already friends with people. He barely sees his friends after they become friends in the show, which is very unlikely to be a problem that your version of Alucard will suffer from. So, basically, once you've made friends, have fun, throw off your training wheels, and be the beautiful himbo vampire your heart knows you can be.
One last thing to note is that Alucard is so unbelievably elegant. He's so elegant. Like, his movements are so perfect and pristine, and the animation on Alucard is so smooth. It's wonderful. But you, as a D&D player, you are only as elegant as the dice actually let you be. You could very easily be describing yourself as this wonderful, flowing movement vampire, and then roll a nat 1 and fall flat on your face. That happens all the time, and you have no control over it. But I have very good news, and it's that our friend Alucard, despite being so unbelievably elegant, even in the show, he completely biffs it sometimes, so don't feel too bad.
You've got nothing but insults, have you? A tired little... Please, this isn't a bar fight. Have some class.
Just narrate your Alucard ripoff as elegantly as you possibly can, and when you biff it, own it, and then get up from the fall angrier and ready to fight. Because that's sort of what Alucard does in the show. Alucard isn't perfect, and if you play him as perfect, you're going to have an extremely flat character. So make sure you've got some flaws. Let's talk setting, let's talk villains. Welcome to the DM side of the screen. Now, in this DM section, we're going to be a little bit less blatant about ripping off than we were in the players section, which was primarily about impersonating different aspects of the other characters. Here on the DM side, we're mostly going to be analyzing the tropes and how you could spin those tropes into a D&D version, which may look nothing like the Castlevania TV show. Unsurprisingly, here on this side of the screen, we're going to be talking a lot about the villains and the antagonistic kind of plots for your players. So, let's get started in the obvious place. Let's talk Dracula.
Dracula is an interesting villain. I get the sense that he was a mostly contained threat at the start of the show. Right at the beginning, he's pulled out of a sort of semi-retirement in a flurry of revenge that shakes the world to its foundations. That's a cool little plot element that can really set a story off right. Your big bad evil guy can begin your game as a good guy, or possibly as an old evil that's made its peace with the world. The events in your first few sessions, possibly instigated by the players, will set your big bad evil guy on a setting-shattering revenge spree. It's kind of a neat, morally gray kind of mood that it sets in your game if your villain has a justifiable bone to pick with the world, and the players are in a position where they might even be able to sympathize, were they, and countless innocents, not in the way of that revenge. You can set up a game like this and have it feel nothing like Castlevania. It's just a really good trope.
Here's one possible sample idea. There's a lich who's existed for thousands of years, and has been more or less the enemy of the world since that time. However, over the millennia fighting against humanity, he's sort of reached the natural end point of his ability to care. And he's sort of mellowed out completely. He's got this sort of impromptu, informal truce with humanity, just hanging out inside his crypt, whatever. The player characters, oblivious to all of that, find a nearby tomb that is completely unexplored. No one has talked about it. No one has been in it in 1,000 years. And the town hires the adventurers to see what's up inside. It's a pretty normal dungeon crawl, full of undead. Players get out after having dealt with the undead inside, and it is very quickly realized that they just desecrated the tomb of that Lich Lord's long dead spouse. Boom. Instant world-ending revenge plot. Ready to go. The possibilities are endless. This is just like what I came up with on the top of my head. There are a million ways. Use your imagination. Think about this. Think of the villain who was in stasis and the forces of good pulled the bad guy out of stasis, and you get that sort of righteous revenge feeling about it. The Lich example I came up with is one possibility out of thousands, out of millions. Put your own spin on this. You will have a very interesting set of themes in your campaign.
And here's another thing we can take that sort of goes hand in hand with the first trope we identified, but the two can very easily be separated without losing anything. Dracula's war on humanity is described in the show as being the world's longest suicide note. Dracula has no plan for his own survival, or even for the survival of vampire kind after wiping out humanity. Dracula died when his wife did, and he's utterly torn between not wanting to go on and upon taking revenge. His reckless and apocalyptic plot is his compromise. End humanity and himself as quickly as possible. Dracula's shtick is a bit unique to him, but you can very easily envision other types of villains who want to be defeated or who do not want to live through their plans, and it can be a very interesting element to work with.
Let's envision an evil emperor sitting atop a vast and uncaring bureaucracy that has matched himself at his worst. He has created a truly awful system that will outlive him. He is powerless to halt this machine he has created, this bureaucratic machine. He begins acting with the only thing he can get that is outside of the system that he built. And he finds this plucky group of heroes and begins manipulating the situation to set these heroes up for success. He means to die at the end of this. He means his life work to be destroyed at the end of the hero's journey. It creates some dissonance if the players find out, but even if it doesn't, it actually gives you some really unique things that you can do as a DM that you wouldn't get in other campaigns. The big bad evil guy is trying to be defeated. So you could have very realistic fortresses and highly defensible dungeons, but the big bad evil guy has intentionally designed these things with flaws that can be exploited. And he has done this very specifically for the players. And the players should get the hint early on that they've got some form of benefactor. But maybe or maybe not, they will discover later on that the end villain of this whole thing is actually the person who is trying to help them win. Their biggest enemy is their greatest ally and is putting on a performance of trying to stop the heroes, but is actually their number one supporter. Once again, that's one possible example. There's many ways you can take this if you want to take your cues from Dracula.
Now, the two humans in Drac's court provide a different sort of lesson. I think it's obvious to all that we can pull a few more themes from Isaac's story than we can from Hector's, so we'll touch on Hector when we analyze the Styrian plot, but for now, we'll stick to Isaac. Isaac is an interesting villain, in that he sets himself up to be the big bad of the 5th season, but in the end, he just doesn't do it. He turns away from villainy before he gets his time to be the big bad, so that he can build something good instead. I'm gonna be real, guys. I completely thought that Isaac was gonna be the big bad of the whole series while I was watching it, but then he just, grew into a better person without needing any input from the protagonists, and I have never seen anything like this in another fantasy story. This completely shook me, and I think it could be a very unique thing to intrigue your players if you can do it right. I could foresee a story in which it's a campaign about pursuing this wretchedly awful villain all across the world, and no matter how far he flees, you, the player characters, will pursue him to the ends of the earth. You're constantly tracking him across towns he just left. But there's a strange little element that's coming over time, in that the farther the big bad evil guy runs from you, the more the people begin to speak positively about him. And the more you start to find that he has begun to change his ways, and you're hearing from people as you chase him, as you're searching for information as to where he went, you'll start to hear more and more that this guy helped me, this guy saved me, this was a good man, this was a great person. And by the time the players actually catch up with the big bad evil guy, he's completely changed from hero to villain. And this creates a very interesting moral quandary for the players. Do they bring this semi-redeemed villain? Do they allow him to go on his way, having changed himself? Or do they bring him to justice for the crimes he did in his past, even though he is no longer that person? The vampire sisters are Styrian, sure. But are they Habsburgs? Alright, quick little chin checkerino here. Let's double check. We'll see if we've got evidence. Hey, what's that? Carmilla, what are you hiding? What are you hiding? So we end up seeing the Council of Sisters through the eyes of Hector, which is why we're talking about him more here than in the last section. Hector is dragged in chains to the icy, far northern wasteland of southern Austria. Is Styria cold? It might be. It's mountainous, so that last joke might not make sense, but, you know, I'm Canadian and I have to make fun of other places that call themselves cold because the national prestige is on the line here. Okay, Styrian Council. We're introduced by Carmilla, yoinking away our soft boy who tried to euthanize the human species. And we're kinda mad about this, aren't we? Carmilla definitely did our gray-haired hottie dirty. But anyway, we meet Carmilla's sisters and see that they're at least mildly better than she is. I'm not going to go so far in depth here. If you want to rip off the specifics of the Styrian vampire court, then go for it. But for me, the interesting thing is the way that we see how these monstrous women are sort of just fighting and scheming just to maintain their way of life. They are definitely evil, beyond the shadow of a doubt, but we kind of come to understand why they're this way, and maybe we even begin to sympathize.
Obviously, it's a bit of a long-running thing, and a bit of a meme, that players, given the option, will never, ever, in a million years, let themselves be captured. But if they are captured, or if you begin a campaign with them having just been captured, then this whole Styria thing starts to become a very interesting thing you can work with. Now, this is one of those ones where I think it will translate the best if you run this story arc with actual vampires. Because vampires used to be human, and we all kind of have this little built-in modern world sympathy that they can't really help that they drink blood. You know, it's a predator-prey kind of thing. they need to do what they do or they will die. So vampires work best because you've got that built-in sympathy. However, you could do something else. We'll use orcs as our little spitballed example here. So we're going to say that a group of orcs has just captured the players and enslaved them to help fortify their camp. Some of the orcs, and this is very important, some of the orcs are genuinely quite sorry about what has happened to the players. They know that it is necessary for the survival of this orc clan for the player characters to be enslaved, but they will do everything they can to try and make this a fairly comfortable arrangement. There's a lot of very high-minded ethical questions to ask there. You could make it very obvious to your players that this orc clan, if they do not use slaves to fortify their encampment, then they will be killed by surrounding tribes, surrounding nations, monsters, whatever. And so you create this sort of moral quandary in them. Sort of like the vampires of Styria, where they're kind of doing that what's that phrase about ancient Rome? They conquered the world in self-defense. That's kind of the Styrian vampire kind of thing. Conquering the world to keep themselves safe. Well, that's what these orcs are doing too, in our example. So you put this moral quandary in the players' heads, and like I said earlier, you're not going to be answering the moral question of, is the slavery justified? You're going to let the players decide. Because later on, you're going to put the players into a position where they can try and continue to help this orc tribe, or they can take their revenge for the slavery. And leave that to the players to decide what they're going to do. You, as the DM, keep your nose out of it. We're not talking about your morals here. We're talking about the morals of your player group and posing interesting questions for them to answer. Okay, the absolute last thing we're going to be talking about ripping off, and I have been so excited this entire time I've been recording, because this is my favorite thing in all of Castlevania.
My god, the core trio are just in no danger whatsoever when they're all assembled, are they? Sure, Dracula beats them senseless, but Dracula is Dracula, so, you know. Castlevania plays its plot pretty slow in a lot of ways. The three are divided, either emotionally or physically, or they simply can't find whatever it is they need to smash. But when the three are finally together, they become a complete and total wrecking ball that just can't be stopped. We don't see them in much danger once they're united. We just get to sit there on our couches and cackle maniacally as the bad guys have to come to terms with just how screwed they are. This is a trope you'll see a lot in ensemble pieces, but I've rarely seen the power played up to such a level. Look at these three! They're like, yeah, dog, we got 3 dudes, let's attack the home base of a world-ending vampire army head on. And then they just win, like it was easy. Look at them! Look at them! They didn't even need some magical MacGuffin thing, they just showed up and destroyed it all. I think it goes without saying that this is a good little thing that you can aim for in a high-level campaign. Your PCs are the mightiest damn heroes in the world, and if you can just get them where they need to be, they're pretty much guaranteed to win. If you plan on running your higher levels kind of like this, it mostly just comes down to good encounter and story design. Make sure that combat is relatively rare, but it should be a gleeful ass-kicking when it finally comes.
But, I mean, there is another way to do this, and this has been a specific campaign style that has been on my personal to-do list for a long time. I think probably at least 5 years as a DM, I've been wanting to run a campaign like this. And realistically, it's probably going to be on my DM wish list for a very long time. So I'm just going to give it to you, and maybe some of you all can do something with this. So, yeah, you know, the quick and dirty of what this kind of campaign you'll be setting up, if you're doing this, is that you'll be doing a Blues Brothers, we're getting the band back together kind of campaign, with the band being a band of extraordinary, legendary heroes that are all coming back together after so long apart. Now, I mean, that's nothing revolutionary. There's probably a fair number of campaigns you've played that are all about that kind of stuff. But the problem is there's sort of a plot structure issue to running a campaign like this. Obviously, you can't have your players all adventuring separately and not coming together until the end of the campaign. D&D doesn't work like that. D&D isn't fun like that, so don't do that. But the alternative way of doing things isn't much better. You take this like band of heroes who need to come together to save the day, and you put them back together right at the very beginning of the campaign. Well, that kind of erases the narrative oomph, because now they're just a normal party with an interesting backstory, which backstory doesn't carry the game, because, you know, you're not playing the backstory, you're playing the game. And it erases the mechanics, because if you are getting this high-powered, world-shattering group of people together, and they all come together and it's a normal game, well, you know, there goes the fun. So my solution to this particular version of the trope, and how you would make it actually work in a narratively satisfying way that meshes well with the mechanics of D&D, is that you have your characters all create 2 characters. The first character will be the character that they're playing through the majority of the campaign. You're going to have them pick a lower level character. And then the second character is going to be that hero of legend that needs to come together with the other heroes of legend to save the day from whatever world-spanning threat is gonna kill everyone. And then the entire campaign is about this low-level party running around trying to convince these high-level, incredible, legendary heroes to come together to save the world. And they've all got their own dramas, they've all got their own problems, but when they do finally come together, there is no chance for the big bad evil guy. Like, it should be no contest. So in the finale, the players will switch from playing their low-level characters to playing their high-level legendary characters, and just get to enjoy themselves, enjoy the fruits of their low-leveled labor by getting control of these high-powered characters and just wiping the absolute, like, just wiping the floor with the bad guys. This should be a power fantasy. The final showdown, if you have gathered these heroes, shouldn't be this, like, struggle that will they win or won't they? If you're ripping off Castlevania, the second that the core trio stepped into Dracula's castle, there was no possibility of defeat. You could see it, you could see the way they moved. It was a matter of getting them there, and once they're there, they're gonna win. Well, that's what you're going through in your campaign. Your low-level characters are working to get the high-level characters there. And once they are there, well, you win. And I have a little tiny quirk with this setup that the forever DMs in the audience will absolutely love to hear. And it's that because you are making these high-level characters who kind of need to be out of the player control for a while, because Otherwise, the metagaming aspect of it will just be like, you show up to recruit this guy and they'll just go like, oh, okay, I'm gonna come along because I'm also the person who wants me to come along, so I'm gonna cooperate without any problems. So you don't want that, because that the whole campaign is bringing them together. So you want there to be some complications for each of these legendary heroes that you're trying to recruit. So the way that you maintain your player agency and maintain some amount of ownership over these characters that they're controlling is that you bring all of your players on as like a co-assistant DM to help you with your planning and your plotting and all that for the story arc that involves the legendary hero they've made. And the side effect to this is, now that you've brought some of those players onto the other side of the DM screen, some of them might get the taste for it. And that is how you rip off Castlevania in your D&D game. I am really hoping you guys like this video. This is the very first one where I've attempted to pull everything all together and release something really high quality. Everything up till now has been me sort of learning the ropes of the camera work, the lighting, the editing. This is the first time where I properly meant to make something good. So I'm really hoping it all pulls through in the end, and I hope you liked it. If you like this kind of stuff, please subscribe to see more. At this point, you're kind of just doing charity, because I don't have any fucking subscribers.